I'm Al Starr. I am presently Interim Vice Chancellor of Learning and Student Development at the Community College of Baltimore County. I've been with the college for 31 years. I started out as a faculty member in the English department, spent much of my career in the English department, eventually became a department head for the English department, an interim dean of the Humanities and Arts Division, and now I'm interim vice chancellor. I think it's important that I have all interim positions the rest of my life. I don't want to do anything permanently. Well, I can still remember the first day that I arrived on this campus, and what you'll find interesting is what I'm going to begin with. I grew up in Northwest Baltimore, and you'd think I would have been to Essex Community College at that point, and I had never been there. I had been to Catonsville once. I went there for a wrestling meet, but I had never been to Essex Community College. And I had, in fact, never been to Essex. So that when I came over here, I don't know what my expectations were, but they certainly weren't what I saw. The campus is gorgeous, and I think we forget how beautiful this campus is. And I drove onto the campus, saw the trees, saw the buildings, and it was a dream come true. And what was scary was all of a sudden this job that I was applying for was one that I really, really wanted to get, as opposed to it's just another interview. And there's a powerful sense of place here, and I think there's the same sense of place on each of the campuses, but for me it was Essex. I will go beyond that and talk about my interview because it's rather humorous. I was interviewing to work in the English department. Charlie Lobheim, that's a name that some people were here a long time ago will remember, was chair of the English department. And I was waiting outside the interview room for my interview, and out comes my high school English teacher, who had been the person who was interviewed before I was. Now, what made that problematical was the fact that my high school English teacher was the best teacher I ever had in my life. Having seen him walk out, I said to myself, well, we're not getting this job, so have fun. And that actually made me relax the rest of the interview. I went from the interview with the committee to an interview with Bill Ellis, who's a name you may have heard along the way. He was a division dean. And one of his first questions was, why should we hire you? And my answer was, because I'm a great teacher. And his response was, so what? Which made me a little uncomfortable. And then he said, tell me what else you can do for us. Everybody says they're a great teacher. And I proceeded to answer. And I finished that interview, went over and met with Norm Dreich, another name that people would be familiar with. And Norm Dreich was the associate dean at that time, the associate dean of instruction. And he interviewed me, and I must have done a pretty good job. And he finished the interview by saying, you know, I wish you had applied for the position we had 6 months ago. And I said, why? And he said, well, we've had some really good interviewees this time, but back then we might have hired you. And I was sure I wasn't going to get the job, but here 30 plus years later, the college has hired me, so something must have worked out that day.
Wow.
Some of the people who will be watching this film might have come to the college in the last 5 years and think that whatever we're going through, this is the only time the college has ever gone through certain situations. There are other people who've been here who realize that we've had one interesting situation after another. In my own case, I came in 1974. Around 1980, the college started talking about what was going to happen if the baby boom ended. Would we have to let people go? So they worked on an exigency policy, financial exigency, and I was on the Senate when we worked on it. And we decided that what we would do was go with last hired, first fired. The only problem with that system was I was the last hired person in the English department. And for about 4 or 5 years there, I was the last person hired. And the fact has grown. And if you know anything about organizational culture, what you know is most organizations are going to go through a growth period to where certain changes are going to be accepted. And it's at that kind of peak period where either you begin the cycle of dying as an organization or you are reborn. You kind of redefine yourself. And I think that CCBC, back then, Essex, Dundalk, and Catonsville, has certainly redefined itself at various points along the way. For example, in the 80s was when we really began to look at career education and all kinds of programs that dealt with careers. At the same time, we looked at Con Ed, and the Con Ed department really grew at the same time that we looked at lifelong learning, so that the college went out of a cycle where exigency might have occurred into a cycle where the college really grew and blossomed during the 1980s. And as we go through situations where there might be problems today, I'm sure the college will once again choose to recycle its way into a bigger or a better self, even if it's not a bigger self, a different self. So that if you count back 20 years, you'd be going back into the 1980s, and that's a cooperative event with Baltimore County Public Schools. And each year we bring in a creative writer. We have a series of workshops. And that kind of initiative has led to the kinds of things we're doing today, for example, with college readiness, because we have such a strong relationship with Baltimore County. A final area that I've really had a part in was learning communities. And just before Chancellor McPhail came, Leila Gonzalez Sullivan approached me one day and said, I hear we're having a new chancellor, and this chancellor is interested in the Learning College. I want you to go find something exciting to do that will impress the new chancellor and also will affect our students positively. And she paid for me to go to the League for Innovation, and most of the sessions I went to were on learning communities. And when I came back, I was joined by Linda Zeidman, again a name you might have heard, and the two of us talked to Leila, and we decided that we wanted to get into learning communities. We set up a seminar, invited faculty, administrators, and staff to the seminar. For 7 weeks, people got together and talked about learning communities. And this campus today has a wonderful learning communities program that was started by that seminar, and it is now presently being run by Cheryl Scott. And the program has grown and grown and serviced students in ways that are amazing. I'll tell you, and I read an article in the 80s for a book called Teaching English in the Community College, Endless Possibilities. And at this college, you've heard some of the possibilities the college gave me, but it also gave me the chance to teach anywhere I wanted to teach and in any way I wanted to teach. There was a time when we had a program at Jessup, and I wanted to work with people who were incarcerated, and for about 9 years I got to do that. There was another point when somebody approached me about working with our Friendly Seniors program, and the Friendly Seniors program, which draws maybe 60, 70 people on Wednesday mornings and afternoons to the campus, has been around for years. And one of my best experiences that I ever had as a teacher was going in there and teaching people, many of whom had master's degrees or had no high school degree at all, and teaching them about subjects like we did a short story seminar on a short story sampler. We did a Robert Frost, introduction to Robert Frost, and out of that came a travel studies trip, which I'll never forget, where I took a group of seniors to Vermont and drove a small bus around Vermont during fall foliage, stopped at various places associated with Robert Frost, and walked in the woods with them and read and discussed poetry. It was one of the best experiences I ever